Hey, great. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the public. Welcome to everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Moved by Sam Actonel, second by Martin Lang. Be it resolved that the April 4th, 2022 council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 7 p.m. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. I'll now ask everyone to rise for the playing of our national anthem. Thank you very much. Approve the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or amendments?
Item 7D G, the resolutions concerning North Stormont Public School.
Alrighty. Moved by Martin Lang, second by Rebecca Luck. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Councillor Luck.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to.
Motion is carried. Thank you. All righty. Moving on to presentations and delegations. We have Warden Williams here along with CAO Tim Simpson from the United Counties of SDNG. So come on up.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having us here this evening. It's a very much a pleasure. Is this a bit loud?
No, it's good.
A pleasure to be here and to see you all face to face. I love these tablecloths.
Thank you.
They're fantastic. So we're here. We're doing our dog and pony show, Tim and I, across all of SDNG. You're number 2. And we're here basically to share some information with you and to, like some of you, obviously, the mayor and deputy mayor sit around the council table, the county council table, but some of you may not be as familiar with some of the activities that have been going on the last few years. So we'd just like to update you. And we'd also like to know if the county priorities are sort of gelling with your local priorities. Are there, or is there room for improvement, or, your thoughts on that would be greatly appreciated. So what we want to do is review our county strategic priorities that were developed at the beginning of the council term 3 years ago. So we would like to talk about smart service delivery, obviously, educating children in their own communities. That's been a very active file, and we will have more updates soon on that, but not quite. Leveraging healthcare partnerships and equitable access, and then community sustainability and communication, the foundation of success. Now, these are all sort of very broad strategies, and there are lots of pillars under them, and Tim is actually going to go into some detail on some of the things we've accomplished over the last 3 years. And then finally, we'll end up with some of the capital works. Whoops, it should say South Glengarry. Sorry about that. So go ahead, Tim.
Great, thank you, Warden Williams. Can everybody hear me okay? It's great being here. I haven't seen some of you in 2 years in person, so it's great seeing you on a lot of screens. And Councillor Luck, nice to meet you. I'm Tim Simpson, I'm the county CIO. So you've got a busy agenda tonight, so Carmen and I were talking a bit earlier. We should be about, what, 3 hours or so?
No more than 3.
Okay, so just kidding. So I'm just going to get into the priorities of the county strategic plan that the warden mentioned, and we'll finish off with just an overview of some of the capital projects that are happening in this township this year as we speak. So first strategic priority, we call it smart service delivery. So I'm just going to cover a couple points under that pillar that we have. So we've got it's not news anymore, but last year, after about 10 years of trying, we got a new shared service agreement with the city. So which is works quite well and allows the county to have a lot more engagement on those services that the city provides for us. There's a regional waste management review ongoing, and certainly your public works folks would be involved with Ben and all the other public works folks across the county working on that. So that's going to be coming forward in the next couple months as a draft and then as a finalized document. We've made a lot of IT improvements, and I see Mike, our IT director's here, so if it doesn't work, we can blame Mike, but we've done a lot of IT improvements in the last couple of years. We've got more support through IT support positions. We've got a server cluster to host VADM, other business systems, which has improved in performance, and we now back up all off-site, all local municipal data in addition to the county data. We've just inked, well, most recently, actually last month with North Glengarry, they came on board in terms of the county planning regime. So we've got South Dundas, North Stormont, and North Glengarry as part of that hub. So we're providing services for those local municipalities. So that saves money and provides better service to local residents. And we're pretty heavily involved in the economic development, tourism. There's more engagement, there's more collaboration, not only with local municipalities, but with the city as well, which is a good thing. And maybe, Mr. Mayor, I'll take questions at the end, or if that's okay with you. Okay, thank you. There's quite a bit of material, we'll just get it through pretty quickly. As Warden Williams mentioned, you've probably been reading, there's quite an active file right now with on the education file, and I noticed you pulled the North Stormont Public School out of your consent agenda, so hopefully you'll pass that motion this evening. So we've kind of finished the first phase, and that's the development of the comprehensive review. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it. There's a lot of, it's quite a lengthy document. There's a lot of information in there, but so what we're doing right now is we're taking that largely academic plan, and we're developing an action plan right now with we've hired Dr. Paul Bennett, so he's working with us on a very brief and crisp action item plan that we're actually having a meeting on Thursday to review the draft, and then with a view of bringing it to council at our April meeting this month. So we're well into the next phase. We had a symposium, and I know some of you were at the symposium we held in February, and we're now developing the action plan, which is going to outline how we're going to go forward over the next I would say 6 months to a year in terms of that file. So hopefully we'll get some positive traction with that. Next strategic priority is another one that's very topical. It's all about healthcare access, healthcare partnerships and providing equitable access for ST&G residents. As I mentioned, that first bullet point, the Warden's Caucus certainly has long-term care as a priority. There's 3 types of long-term care homes. There's municipal long-term care, which we share with the city. So Glenstordon Lodge is a not-for-profit. So we've, as you'll see there, the county's pledged $6.5 million for the capital expansions of the Dundas and Maxwell Manors, and there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to try to help those facilities get the capital that they need to redevelop this year. You'll note that there was a meeting today actually with the Daisy Group, so they're lobbying the province for the next 4 months. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Yes, so this afternoon we actually had a meeting with Minister Calandra, the Minister of Long-Term Care, and it was a good meeting. There were, some issues there with regard to trying to squeeze $40 million out of, out of the provincial government. But it was a good meeting. We're on their radar with regards to needing more capital dollars for both the Maxville Manor and the Dundas Manor. And so I just wanted to give you that brief update.
And we're looking at other ways to advocate and to support for long-term care sector as the province is gearing up for the election in June. The next priority for us is community sustainability. We call it where you want to be. So we want to create the conditions that in high-speed broadband and mobile broadband services, the cellular enhancement project is well underway. That's the one that Rogers is working on. And they just erected or refurbished a tower, I believe in Greenfield was one, and Glen Robertson was the other. So this is going to roll out over between now and 2025. So there's new towers, enhanced towers, so that will give better mobile broadband access. Hopefully it'll improve it. I just live down the road and I still have to go on my front stoop to talk on the phone, but hopefully that will improve that. So that's rolling out. And then the province is working on a massive, the broadband issue that we have. Schools in our rural communities, I've already touched on that. That's a very important piece for council, perhaps the most important piece at this point to save our schools and to make sure that our kids don't have to be bused an hour and a half to go to school. So that's certainly a big, big priority. Natural gas, that's something we've been working on for several years, and I know gas, I believe, is going into just off Boundary Road, what's that? Yeah, Glendale Sub, and so that's a good thing. And we're working, there's a lot of work happening on the affordable housing, those files with those partners as we can. It's a very complex project and a problem, so we're hoping to be part of the solution on that. And the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan that was developed by the Social Development Council with input from all local partners, law enforcement, social services agencies, county, city, local municipalities. They're coming to they're coming to our council meeting, I believe, this month to talk about the draft, and that's going to be something, I believe it's going to come forward for approval in May. The last pillar is communication. The foundation of sufficiently are all our available media tools. We've got a new website that was launched late last year, and on that website we partnered with North Dundas, South Dundas, and North Stormont. We're using social media and traditional print media as much as we can, and I think successfully as well. And we're working closely with local municipalities such as South Glengarry on consistent messaging and tax inserts, traffic, road closures. So we're harmonizing that to the greatest extent possible. And we're looking at new digital tools for public services, whether it's court services, provincial offenses, roads in particular, planning. We're looking at online payment options and permitting. We've got some funding in Hastings, and then Frontenac, SDNG will be one permit for the whole area. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as well, and online payment options. So that's all exciting stuff, and it's been certainly hastened by the pandemic, but it's something that I think is roaring forward quite well. I'll just touch briefly, you're probably aware of most of these, I'll just touch very briefly on some of the major capital works that are happening in this township this year. So there are 4 main road projects happening in South Glengarry this year, 2 between Glen Walter and Summerstown, so that's about 1.1 million. 2 between Summerstown and Lancaster, 1.6 million. 25 from 20 to the chapel, that's about $1 million. Pave or pulverization, cold in place rehabs. And then we're doing some minor repairs on County Road 19. Council had a pretty robust discussion about that at the last meeting. It's in such a state, we're just going to do a few minor repairs to hold it and then redo the whole thing rather than try to do it piecemeal, do it all at once. It's in bad shape between Summerstown Road and, well, Glencashin, I would say, at least. And then the other transportation-related work, we're looking at where Alistair and Jerome live at the corner of County Road 27 and Glen Road. We're looking at that hill, trying to improve sightlines, excuse me. Culvert end treatments and miscellaneous minor repairs on crack sealing, skin patching, and we're doing a roads need study for the whole county this year, so that's a big one. So that'll categorize all the nature and the repairs throughout, and then that'll form the basis for our next 4-year plan. So do the study this year, and then I'll give us year 4, year 3, year 2, year 1 for the next term of council. So in a nutshell, those are the capital works. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I know Warden Williams, if you got any remarks or questions?
Well, once again, thank you very much for hosting us tonight. We appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, we'd be happy to, Tim will be happy to answer them.
Very good. Thank you for the thorough report. Councillor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thanks for the report, guys. Much appreciated. And like we see county minutes, but sometimes aren't really aware of everything that's going on. Much appreciated to hear you say that you're going to do some work on 19. I think I mentioned it last time you guys were here, and there is a section there that's, I think you're right, if it's not worth trying to do one little piece, but if you could improve from 27 to even to Glenbrook for a little bit for the year would be much appreciated to the residents. We're getting a lot of comments. And I think quite a few people are using the Glen Road now instead of that road to get to Cornwall. So it's putting more traffic on a, secondary road there. So the other thing is that you said you're going to look at the intersection on 27 and the Glen Road. Is there any, I don't know if it's just that they're not being careful or if it's whether because the stop sign is east and west at the Glen Road and it's north and south on the other one and people forget, but we go to quite a few accidents at 27 and 19.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we're head scratchers on that as well. I mean, certainly the hill at Jerome's is an issue, people coming from the south up the hill. But, I mean, it's mostly local. I go through there I mix it up. Sometimes I take the Glen Road, sometimes I take 19. But I don't know why that is there, but we're going to look at primarily at the hill and possibly what we can do to fix that. And they put up some emotionally intelligent signage there, I believe. Not regulatory sign, but something that reminds people that they need to slow down and stop. We've also talked about rumble strips.
Something like that.
Flashing lights.
I think maybe people they forget which one they're on because we do alternate quite often. I'm not sure if that's it, but I do know that we've gone to numerous accidents there. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. I do concur with CEO Simpson that there is something going to be happening there this summer on 19 and 27.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, just it was just something I wanted to hit on as well, like at Chesterville. I hit those all the time. I don't love them, but when you need them, they might stop a major accident because I think it's just that at night people get maybe a little more comfortable and figure they could see the lights, and depending on what crops grow and where, you can't see it all the time and tree cover, so.
Deputy Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I was hoping that for the benefit of the rest of council, if you could speak a little bit more, provide more detail on the regional waste management study, where that is, and sort of timelines where there might be more information.
Ben and I haven't talked about it in a couple of weeks, but I know they're working with the consultant and local public works folks to make some updates and make some changes. I believe the plan is to present it locally in the coming months and get more feedback before coming to County Council in the fall with the recommendations. That's the plan. It's taken quite a bit more time, I think, than originally envisioned, just because there's a lot of different options and it's extremely complicated, just between diversion and now the blue box is moving to provincial responsibility. Now there's composting, and then there's landfilling, and then North Glengarry has the rare, and then there's testing, and it's taken longer than, and I know Warden Williams has a comment.
And when I was talking to Ben and Tim about it, I said, whatever we do, this study needs to be, it needs to come to the table and be successful. We don't want it coming to County Council and having it be defeated there. So in my view, the first thing that needs to happen is all of the public works directors of every lower tier need to be on board with the project. Similarly, so do all the CAOs. And then county council. It needs to kind of go that way, because if we don't have our lower tiers on.
Good. All righty. So seeing no more questions, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll see you guys soon.
Great, thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your meeting.
All righty. So moving on to staff report 43-2022. I believe Mr. CBO's Chris Raby is coming up to the table. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, good evening, council, and everyone in attendance here tonight. The purpose of my staff report this evening is to highlight a new proposed building bylaw. I'll also be highlighting the proposed changes and additions to the current building bylaw. So the current building bylaw is approximately 10 years old, as it was enacted by council in 2012. Building bylaws are typically reviewed every 3 to 5 years. So we're definitely a little past due, if you will, in terms of updating our bylaw and keeping it current. The authority for council to pass a bylaw for the enforcement of the Building Code Act comes from Section 7. I would like to discuss administration's reasoning behind the proposed fees. Council will recall this cost recovery chart from a previous information report. The cost recovery percentage in a perfect world would be 100%. In 2021, our department issued over 300 permits. However, we still operated at a $50,000 deficit. With that being said, administration would like to increase departmental revenue by raising permit fees. However, it's important for us to maintain competitive building permit fees so that we're not driving development outside of the municipality. I do believe that the bylaw presented here tonight is a happy medium between these two factors. So static fees. Administration was previously leaning tonight that the square footage fees for residential, non-residential, and farm structures will remain at the current fee rates of 79 cents and 49 cents respectively. These fee rates were established on January 1st, 2017. So residents have enjoyed a nice little stretch without a fee increase. Bylaw additions. Administration is proposing to add numerous permit classifications to the bylaw, and the reason for this is to address situations where our current bylaw has been silent. We're looking at adding classifications for signs, tents, and public pools, which are all regulated under Part 3 of the OBC. Construction without a building permit, we've proposed the fee at 2 times the current fee rate. And the reason for this is to act as an incentive program to deter people. Now be $2,000. Occupancy permit surcharge, that's also a new fee that's proposed. We've set it at $500. From time to time, residents will move into a new home without first obtaining the proper occupancy permit from the municipality. And this would also deter people from going ahead without those approvals. Dormant application renewal, permit renewal, and permit transfers are also proposed classifications. So just continuing on with the bylaw addition, the building code has added tiny homes, whereby the municipality is going to be issuing compliance letters. Limiting distance agreement is also a new proposed fee, set at $200 per agreement plus any third-party costs. And just to remind council what a limiting distance agreement is, it's an agreement between 2 property owners, and we're proposing a fee set at $100. Most commonly, we would issue an order to comply, and this fee would cover the cost for the inspector to go out to deem whether or not that order's been complied with or not. Building permit fee indexing. So the way this is proposed to work, it would be adjusted annually on January 1st of each year. The adjustment would be in accordance with the Bank of Canada's annual consumer price index over the past 12 months, back to council each year in order to keep up with the cost of inflation itself. Another bylaw addition is a tiered administrative performance deposit system. Basically, the reason behind this tiered system is to act as an incentive program for residents to close their open building permit files. Currently at the township, there's thousands of open building permits where residents don't have any sense of urgency to call in and get those finals. So hopefully a tiered system would help with that regard. So it's proposed if 0% if 5 years goes by and you haven't completed your construction project. Bylaw alterations. So speaking of those performance deposits, we have proposed to increase the residential side of things significantly. Currently, residential deposits are set at $1,000 for new dwelling units only. We're proposing a system that takes into account residential and non-residential projects based on construction value. A new home based on the proposed chart here would fall in the range of $3,000 to $4,000 compared to the previous $1,000. And like I said, this is just basically an incentive. Sewage systems and farm structures are exempt. Permit classifications regarding residential base fees, non-residential base fees, and farm-based fees are proposed to go from $150 to $250. This might look significant when you look strictly at the base fee, but if we're dealing with a permit and the value was $2,500, the new permit cost would be $2,600 increase. And the primary reason behind this is because our costs to the municipality from our septic consultant, Lakeside Green Environmental, those costs are increasing. So in turn, we've taken those costs to us. I've added an additional 10% to those to cover the time of staff for handling and processing the permits at the office. And that's how we've come up with those fees. Swimming pool enclosures are proposed to go from $100 to $150, not a big change here, and moving permits from $100 to $250. So what are our next steps? The principal authority is required to provide 21 days notice of the public meeting, an estimate of the costs for administering and enforcing the act, the amount of the fee change, and the rationale for imposing or changing the fee. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd like to turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor, and open the floor to council for any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you for the detailed report. As you said, it's good to review these bylaws from time to time, and it's certainly it's time for us to view this one. Does anyone have questions for CBO Rabi? Deputy Mayor?
So where you mentioned that you were going to be doing this, and there was comments on how can we, keep the cost of that department lower. And really, you don't have a lot of tools at your disposal in terms of lowering your expenses. So I think this approach of using the performance deposit is a good one because, really the only way you can improve your efficiency is by not having these files that you have to chase after. And if we can encourage residents to close them more timely, then that by virtue will make your department more efficient. But on the topic of performance deposits, and I've had a concern brought to me recently by residents where that sort of hit me initially as being a long time frame to go down to zero, maybe not encouraging speed enough. I can understand in certain areas it doesn't really matter if your neighbor is doing construction, but if you're in a smaller lots where you might have a neighbor doing construction for 5 years, where that means that they can have they can keep their demolition materials on site, but also on the residents in that area. So I don't know if that's something that, I'm just bringing that up as an example, whether or not that 5-year time frame makes sense. So I was wondering if other people had thoughts on that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Jaworski. I certainly know what you're referring to, and I think that's the exception to the rule, but it's a valid, there's no incentive for them to finish the reports. I don't think we have, do we have an ability to force them to?
So we have no ability to force someone to get a final. There is that the final required inspection would be occupancy in most situations. So there's really no urgency or requirement to get a final inspection.
So could we, is it deck's not completed, but everything else is good, you know, you could give occupancy, right? Like
Yeah.
there's certain situations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the building code outlines a set of requirements for occupancy, whereby if a resident
I think I'm fine with the way you've got it written here. It's not going to cost somebody a lot more to build if they can, you know, move the process along and follow the rules. And 2 years is, I know sometimes things do take a long time, but 2 years is a reasonable amount of time, I think. So I'm okay with it the way it is. Thank you.
And there's also like common sense, right? Like if someone is waiting for something and they're trying to work with you, you're not gonna, I think we have to have a little bit of that as well, where if someone's waiting on a special thing coming in from somewhere across the ocean, and there's tons of delays these days, I think we have to have that mechanism as well, that you as the CBO can say, well, we understand you're trying to finalize, and, you know, you should have that flexibility as well, I think, you know, if at your discretion. Councillor Luck? Yeah.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ravi, for a very detailed presentation. I am definitely in favor of the performance deposits and how you have them set up. I think during our last presentation, I kind of made mention of my outstanding building permit and how 2 years, like it just, sometimes for something so small, it takes time. But as Councillor Lang said, I think you have a good distribution of years. I was just kind of curious about the distribution of the values, in that you say you have thousands of open outstanding permits. How many of those would you say fall under the $25,000 where no refundable fee is required, and so therefore it would make this option obsolete?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, obviously I don't have the exact number, but I would say that there would be in the neighborhood of maybe 20% would be not applicable, if you will, based on the 25,000 or less. But there's certainly a significant number of permits that are open that would fall into this category.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Tadell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks, Mr. Abbey, for your presentation. I'll agree. I think the performance deposit is a good idea. I'm fine with the way you've structured it, because I think for the most part, you know, if you look at it, say from a garage where maybe you've got the windows in and you've got the you know, you've got them foamed up and everything done, but your plans call for you to have, you know, you've got some nice interior going in. Maybe somebody drags it out a couple of extra years, drag out the costs, whatever it may be, even though it's functional. I think it's fine if they want to take some of that performance, or maybe hits them in the performance, but I think that setup's good for the 5-year term, no issue that way. I think just give people it's just their money they're losing at the end of the day if they want to take more time. The one thing I had that just applied to it was, this I'm assuming is from permit date issue?
Correct.
So how often do we issue a permit and then that resident would then have to go through, say, a minor variance or something that could take time? Or, because I'm just more thinking, is there a way of doing it where it's based on work starting or from inspection 1? I know that probably doesn't work with, say, renovations. And then those people can eat up a year in a hurry. No offense to Councillor Luck.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in order for us to issue the building permit, minor variances and planning applications would all be taken care of in advance. So that would handle that type of situation. So I think that using permit issuance date is still an okay starting point.
Okay, no, it was just a concern that we struggle enough with the winter where you can't go in and start digging foundations if you get a building permit issued, say in December, or things drag out that way, but it was just a concern that way, maybe with survey delays and things like that we might see an issue with it, but if we see that, I guess you can use your discretion, I would say, at that point. I know surveys seem to take months to get somebody lined up, and they seem to be going up as well. So, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, good discussion. I don't profess to be a IT wizard, and I was able to upload the files and communicate back and forth. So I think we're on the right step. So, Mr. Abbey, are you coming back at our next council meeting or 2 from now? When do you want final comments from council before you come back for the 3rd reading?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the next step in the process will be to line up that public meeting.
Okay.
At least 21 days down the road from now. So we're probably looking, I would like to get comments from the public at that public meeting,
Perfect.
and then we can come back for 3rd reading immediately after that.
Okay, that's good. So thank you very much for your report. Moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Sam McDonnell. Be it resolved that staff report 43-2022 be received, and that bylaw 26-2022, being a bylaw regulating construction, demolition, change of use, and other building permits within the Township of South Glengarry, be read a first and second time this 4th day of April 2022. All those in favor? Motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report has been before our council previously, exactly 2 years ago, where there was a request filed by the developer to seek an extension for draft plan approval. The extension would be granted by the United Counties, but it needs to be supported by South Glengarry Township in order for the United Counties to grant the extension. So just a little bit of history for this subdivision. It was draft plan approved in 2010. And under the Ontario Planning Act, your draft plan approval expires within 3 years. However, you have ability to ask for extension every year thereafter. The United Counties issues extensions for a period of 2 years at a time now. And so this request is back before us, and if it's supported by council and if it's granted by the United Counties, it would be extended until 2024, April of 2024. We have no concerns with the request. Certainly are very supportive of the extension of the required information to the United Counties.
Okay, thank you very much for your report. Ms. Haley, has the zoning changed at all in that area? As you're aware, some of the zoning has changed in the Baynesville area in general. Has there been any change to that zoning in the last 2 years? Has the province put any PSW on it or anything along those lines?
So thank you for that question, Mr. Mayor. No, there's been no change in that location. So I would review that prior to writing this report to make sure we're not going to get caught into, any undevelopability issues or requirement of additional studies and things like that.
And there's no mechanism for us to get them to build the subdivision?
I wish. There's quite a bit of land out there that is ready, but we just can't force individuals to put the shovel in the ground, spend the money. But if you can come up with a really strategic way, let me know. We're hopeful.
We'll try. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Martin Lang. Be it resolved that staff report 44-2022 be received and that Council of the Township of South Glengarry recommends to the United Counties of SDNG Director of Planning Services to extend draftly described as part of Lot 7, Concession 1, Geographic Township of Lancaster, now in the Township of South Glengarry, County of Glengarry. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Okay. And 7AC. Ms. Haley, consider transferring township-owned forested lands.
Okay, thank you. So in the fall of 2021, Council and Administration reviewed parcels of property that the township owns and had a discussion as to which parcels of property we want to sell, we want to keep, and what we can do with these properties. So you may recall that we have 2 pieces of property that we own that council decided they would like to keep these parcels, not develop them, and keep them really for forest cover. And so after that direction from council, we retained the services of Hendry Forestry Services. So Mr. Jim Hendry completed a comprehensive review and report of the two parcels of property. So the first property that we want to discuss is located on Caber Road, on the north side between Caber and County Road that Mr. Henry completed. He identified really what the quality of the forest was, the potential of the forest, and if it was worth us keeping and managing it. And of course, that was definitely the recommendation. I included his recommendations within my staff report as well as it was in the attached report. And you'll see different components that he highlighted that makes this property valuable and worthy of protection. The other property that we discussed was Lancaster Heights property. So this property is basically landlocked. It would be accessed by a road allowance to the south. It currently is connected to a parcel of property that would give direct public road frontage. However, that parcel of property has been deemed to be surplus by council. It will be sold sometime in the future. And we've actually gone through the process of amalgamating it to create it a bigger and more viable lot. So you'll see in my staff report as well, there was different recommendations from Mr. Henry in regards to. After receiving the report, I then had meetings with both the United Counties of SDNG as well as the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. The purpose of me scheduling these meetings and having these meetings was to understand from both organizations if they're interested or willing in taking over the ownership of these parcels of property. This may be something in-house. So in administration's perspective, it would make sense for council to consider transferring these lands or these properties to either the United Counties or the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. And both organizations have very strong ability to manage these properties, make sure that they'll always remain as forest cover, they'll be protected, and they would have a forest management plan that would make sure they're harvesting the trees when need to be harvested and creating a good quality forest or keeping a good quality forest. As you can see in the report, we did not suggest one particular organization over the other. We feel that this is a decision of council. And you'll also may have noticed in my report that if you're not ready to make that decision this evening, it is recommended that you defer it, then have those discussions and allow us to, or come back to allow us to receive your direction and how to move forward. And both would be excellent organizations to look after the properties. Maybe you want to transfer both to one to each, or keep the ownership and we look into doing our own management or maintenance plan by hiring a third-party professional. So that's all I have at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you for the detailed report. Are there any questions? Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess region, do they have the resources in-house to do that? Just, I hate for us to hand it down to them and then just be spreading the costs across everybody else and handing off maybe handing off a responsibility when we can maintain the ownership. So that's just a question as of now.
Maybe the chair of the RCA can answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, and thanks, Joanne, for the presentation, and Sam for the question. My personal opinion here is I'm going to be leaning towards donating to the Raisin Region. The reason being, the counties are managing quite a number of forests, but I believe they're hiring South Nation or have an agreement with South Nation Conservation Authority to manage those for them. And South Nation, I mean, Raisin Region is our local. We were bringing some money into the township. These ones we didn't want to sell. By donating to the Raisin Region, we're guaranteeing that they're going to stay in trees. The next council's not going to come along and change their mind and say, oh, well, maybe we'll actually build something there. So I think it's a win for the environment if we do this. It's a win for us that we're able to do this, and it's not costing us as a township anything to have this done and looked after. So my opinion is that we give it to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. They manage it, and it'll be trees for forever, likely, or well, forever's a long time, but for the foreseeable future anyway. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. I certainly concur with that we're not in a position to manage them in-house, and I think that at some point you gotta, I mean, we didn't even, that one property, we knew about Lancaster Heights, but the other one kind of caught us all by off guard. So I certainly would be in favor of transferring it as well to the RRCA. And I don't know, I mean, we could probably negotiate the transfer that, you know, they're gonna hope to do, you know, certain things with it, because I know, like, in the report that's there, there's work that needs to be done, and hopefully that they would certainly take that to heart and maybe move forward with some of that. But
I have a, truthfully, I don't know whether it should go to the counties or the RRCA. I'm not really clear on what one can do for us versus the other. I'm more familiar with the forest management that the county does. They have a huge amount of land that they are managing, and they seem to be doing a good job. But what's of more interest to me is how certainly I fully support these being kept in tree cover, but you know, we have a lot of treed land that could also be used for recreation. And so that's my bigger interest, is depending on which organization it goes to, what kind of opportunities would continue for residents to potentially use these properties. I know the one on Caber, I guess there was dirt biking and whatnot that was done at one point. I was contacted by a number of residents who wanted us to keep a larger piece of land for like a treed park in that area. And council ultimately decided not to. But I don't think it's really clear for the residents there that we've kept this piece. I mean, I think, as I recall, the original decision was made enclosed and it hasn't really been publicized. So I don't think it's fair to assume that those residents know that we're keeping this piece of property. And I think it'd be fair and in the spirit of sort of public consultation to sort of let people know that we're thinking about keeping this, and is there some sort of vision that they might have for that area, for the residents that are up in Lancaster Heights. So I know that's adding more work to this file, but I think that those are things that are important to consider before we make a decision to go either way. And I also agree with Mr. Hendry that we should be keeping some sort of access off of the Park Hill Circle, even if it's, I don't know, a small easement or something to be able to access that piece of property from that end. Because I assume what's going to happen is people are going to walk through someone's backyard regardless. So it would be better if it's some sort of legal.
in North Lancaster, or Lancaster Heights, is there not legal access with a road allowance at the south end?
Oh, there is.
So if we've already declared the other end surplus to the needs, and it's going to be sold, but there still is legal access at the south side. If you were to drive, perfect. I think there was a little miscommunication. Councillor McDonnell.
Through Mr. Mayor, it was just that in response to Deputy Mayor's comments. There's that road allowance that's there, as well as the power line that comes down that doubles as the skidoo trail. So my concern was that as well, so long as it's subdivision up on the hill. But there is, I mean, there's some nice aesthetics in there, and I mean, it's not worth farming, that's for sure. And I think it's good as it is. It adds to the trail that's there already.
Henry also understood that there was access along that unopened road allowance. I'm suggesting there be two accesses to this property. So I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Councillor Luck. I didn't see you there, I'm sorry. Still getting used to having to not look on a screen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Ms. Haley, I just had a quick question. So to monitor and to maintain the forest, have we historically done anything with these two parcels?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have not. And there's quite a few parcels of property that the municipality would own that we wouldn't allocate money to and do maintenance on. They would just be considered to be vacant.
Seems to be some positive feedback for transferring it to RRCA, but there's also a comment on the floor about taking it back and going for further public consultation. I'm looking for direction. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I guess one thing you could do is you could call a vote and see where you end up. But as far as what Deputy Mayor Jaworski's saying, I'm not totally against having that second access, but it's a separate lot at the moment, so it could be done as a separate issue. It doesn't need to be decided tonight.
That's correct.
We could decide on those two properties tonight, and then, we could, have some discussion, decide whether we want to continue to add another one to it, or to just leave it with the Green Road as the access. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Deputy Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, Councillor Lang, for pointing that out. I think that is a very important piece of information, that it doesn't necessarily impact the decision tonight. But I would suggest that we defer. And that, I mean, I don't think there's very little in the report, truthfully, that explains why we should pick one over the other. And I think we should get some more information from, residents. We're doing our recreation master plan. I don't know, maybe these are things that that sort of fit within that context. So I would suggest deferring before deciding who it goes to.
Okay. Councillor Luck?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. And someone can correct me, but if the counties is having to outsource to maintain this land, I don't think it's fair. I think Councillor McDonnell kind of alluded to that point, in that, we're just snowballing the fees. So I'd be in favor of RSCA.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McDonnell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was on the fence about this as well all afternoon, but I think I'm a little more comfortable going to the RCA. I know one thing I don't want to vote to put it to the counties. I would rather give it to the RCA if we're going to give it. I was more between keeping it in-house and just on the easement. I don't know if we've ever done this, but maybe there's an agreement we can draw up with the power line that's there that comes off of the road to the north of that property. We could maybe pile on their easement and get a legal agreement there in place and save us getting an easement through somebody's property or a resident's property as well.
Okay, so let's see if we can get this passed, and then is that something you could look at, Ms. Haley?
I can, Mr. Mayor, and I do have a couple of other comments, if you don't mind. In regards to an easement on what I'm going to call the building lot, the lot that council that provides access to the public through that property, it could provide limitations on the developability of that property in terms of a building envelope, your septic, your well, because then you would want setbacks from that easement. You're also then inviting, or for lack of a better word, inviting the public to walk through someone's side yard. So I think that needs to be researched a little bit before we can, before I can give you a solid recommendation as to whether that should be considered or not. As for the ability to use these parcels of land for parkland, the one on Caber Road is not the one that has the mountain biking trails. I had to go through a little bit of a learning lesson with the mayor from that, in realizing which properties were which. And so I've since done quite a bit more research on that to have a better understanding of that property and what we own. And I actually had asked Mr. Hendry to see if there was evidence of much recreational activity, and you'll see he mentioned that in the report. In terms of accessing these properties for future park purposes or park land, we would have to have a conversation with the United Counties to see that if that is something that they would want to do, because typically they don't look after parks, as you know. We would also want to work with our Recreation and Parks Director, Ms. Servage, to see what we have to do to declare that as a park. Even if we're not the owner, then what is the responsibilities, whether it's the CA or the municipality, to maintain that if we're promoting it? Obviously, if it's the CA, then it's their responsibility entirely, and they do have experience with managing other parks currently, as you know. So so those are basically my comments at this point, but I can...
Parkland, perhaps not the right word, but I mean, when we look at Summerstown Trails, that's owned by the counties. They have an arrangement with the Friends of the Summerstown Trails where they're doing recreation through county-owned land. Also, the same thing in North Glengarry. They have plots of land where it's similarly, some portions of it are developed for maple syrup production, but then there's lots of walking trails. So I think the counties has a lot of experience in allowing passive recreation through forested lands. So I just wanted to point that out, that I'm not, when we say parkland, I'm suggesting, recreation through forested property, not necessarily parkland, sort of. I know it's not Summerstown Trails, but a la Summerstown Trails.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Lang for the final comment, please.
I moved up already.
I said it again. Jesus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Just a question for Councilor Dworsky. Were you looking at a right-of-way? I assumed you were talking about taking that whole lot to the north and adding it to the 15 acres and making it 16 acres.
That's my preference, but I assume...
Instead of doing a right-of-way through the lot, just instead of selling that lot, adding it to the whole parcel is what I understood you were thinking of. Which could be done at a later time or at any time. All right, I just wanted to clarify that and maybe make mention that Conservation Authority does also do lots of recreational things on properties they own, as, you know, Cooper Marsh, if we're one with trails, and, you know, our beach down at on the front and so forth, so.
I think they're certainly in a better position to do something with it than we are, so. Sam Macdonell, be it resolved that staff report 45-22 be received and that the ownership of the 2 township-owned parcels of land legally described as west half of Lot 13, Concession 8, Geographic Township of Schlonberg, PIN number 6711-70099, and part of Lot 4 and 5, Concession 9, Geographic Township of Lancaster, PIN number 67153-0504, be transferred to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on. 7AD, tender 14-2022, grass cutting. Ms. Servage.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. So this report is related to the grass cutting tender that was issued on Tuesday, March 8th and closed on March 23rd. Please note that the RRCA added their sites to the tender as well. Sites were added to the 2022 grass cutting tender. This includes the South Lancaster Wharf and a water access point owned by the township at the end of Calvin Street. These locations added approximately 0.3 of an acre to the grass cutting maintenance. The scope of work includes a supply of all labor, equipment, and materials necessary to complete the grass cutting and trimming for 2 complete seasons, so 2022 and 2023. The sites were outlined into categories for tender purposes, which includes Williamstown, Lancaster, Martintown, Green Valley, Glen Walter, North Lancaster, Banesville, Glendale, South Lancaster waterfront, and the RRCA locations. So the tender provided mapping with each specific location and acreage. Companies were instructed to bid based on per cut location, which were then grouped into categories that I just listed. The low bidders with the highest score in the evaluation matrix are the recommended contractors, which would be Cut by Me and Charged Up Yardworks. You will see in the report that is recommended that the township goes with Cut by Me for categories A, B, C, D township in 2021 season. I personally didn't have any issues with this company within the few months that I was here at the end of the season. Charged Up Yardworks, which is the company recommended for the Banesville location. They're actually local to Banesville and they provided the lowest price for that location. Last year, the township did go with 2 separate companies for grass maintenance, and that is the recommendation of staff for this year's tender as well. The total price for the tender calculated at an average of 20 cuts per site, with the exception of 10 cuts per cemetery, would be $30,010. Based on the report from last year, this would be $430 less than the anticipated price from 2021. Please note that this total price is for the 2022 season, which will then be applied again for the 2023 season. So that's all I have for this evening. Are there any questions from council?
Thank you very much for your report, Ms. Servage. I really like this format. I think it gives us the best option for getting the best price. I've seen it at the counties. They do the same thing, and I certainly appreciate the RRCA coming on board. I think you get better prices when there's more to cut. So, Deputy Mayor Jaworski.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Servage, for your report, and thank you also for sharing the maps that you created for the tender. That's really helpful, I'm sure, to get clear. And I'm not suggesting you take this on, but it's probably worth mentioning that there are other organizations that could potentially join in on tenders like this also in the future. For example, I'm not committing anyone here, I'm not suggesting I've told them to do this or talked to them about this, but, for example, the Fair Board or some of the churches that are local in Williamstown, as an example, all about getting, better value for everyone's dollar. So I just want to put that out there.
Good. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Martin Lang. Be it resolved that staff report 46-2022 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry award tender 14-2022 to cut by me for groups A, B, C, D, E, F, H, and I, and charge up yard works for group G for grass cutting facilities and parks, and furthermore that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign all appropriate documents. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Servage. All right, and moving on to
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a report that we're bringing forward. Higher.
can't hear you that well. Sorry.
All good? How about now? Yeah, awesome. So through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a report that's being brought forward on behalf of our Drainage Superintendent, Gary MacDonald. And it is to recommend the extension of our contract with McIntosh Perry in preparing an assessment schedule for the McNairn Drain. There's a bit of information in the staff report, but in May of 2018, McIntosh Perry was appointed to prepare this assessment schedule, which is redefining the assessment schedule for the works being done on the McNairn Drain, including some culvert resizing. And so there are three parts of public consultation for something like this. The first one we undertook in November of 2018, and it was an on-site meeting, and all residents that were impacted or affected by the reassessment were invited. Since that time, through COVID, we've been unable, the report has been completed and the information has been brought together, but we've been unable to do the second round of public consultation, which would be a meeting to consider and would also involve all of the residents impacted or abutting property owners. So we've gone beyond the 1 year period that would normally be allowed under the Drainage Act to complete one of these reports, and we are requesting an extension to McIntosh Perry's appointment for this work. And I suppose I'll add in that about 2 months ago, we were optimistic that we would have had that second public consultation, so the meeting to consider later this month, but it's not looking that way. So we're, close, but we're just waiting for things to open up.
Okay. Thank you very much for your report, Ms. McDonald. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And I just wanted to thank Ms. McDonald for the additional information she gave about the public consultations. I had a lot of questions about that because when I see drain going through subdivision, I automatically assume that there's going to be questions and misunderstandings. So I'm glad to hear that there will be consultations, and hopefully folks will be fully aware of what a drain is and exactly how it can financially. Here that there will be information sessions to help folks better understand what this means. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, moved by Martin Lang, second by Rebecca Luck. No. Be it resolved that staff report 47-2022 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry hereby extend the appointment of McIntosh Perry Consulting Engineers Limited under Section 76 and 78(1) of the Drainage Act to complete an assessment schedule and to update the necessary engineer's report for the portion of the McNairn Drain within and adjacent to Place Saint Laurent subdivision located on part of Lot 3, Registered Plan 101. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And Ms. McDonald again, extension of Filion Drain appointment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through, oh, that sounds better than last time. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. This is a very similar report to the last one. Oh dear. However, it's for the Filion Drain instead of the McNairn Drain. So a similar story. In January 2020, we appointed McIntosh Perry as our consultant to complete the assessment schedule for the Filion Drain. The work has substantially been done. However, our second public consultation, so that meeting to consider, has been delayed as a result of COVID, and we're hoping to host it in person. So again, we were expecting 2 months ago to have that meeting this month, and we're looking for a little extra.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, moved by Sam Actonel, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be it resolved that staff report 48-2022 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry extend the appointment of McIntosh Perry Engineers Limited under Section 78 of the Drainage Act to update the Filion Drain Engineers Report as per the scope of work outlined in RFP 11-2019. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Alrighty, moving on to other business. 7BA, vaccination policy update. Mr. Mills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, good evening, council, staff, and the general public tuning in tonight. The purpose of the information report tonight that I'm bringing to you is to update you on the township vaccination policy. A little background information for council. Just almost a year ago in August, the Ontario government amended the Stage 3 under the Reopening of Ontario Act to tighten public health measures because of the rise of COVID-19. That was related to the Delta variant. So recently we went through a wave with the Omicron variant, and now there's predictions that we'll go on to the BA2 Omicron variant wave. Seek out feedback from council and the community and from staff, and perhaps implement their own vaccination policy. It was strongly recommended by the local medical officer of health, and in October of 2021, that should say, we did enact a policy, and the recommendation there was that we come back 6 months later, and we're almost, I guess, to the date of 6 months later, so that's why we're bringing it back. We did have the capacity to do that, as I said, and also it was run through the Ontario Human Rights Commission as to whether we could as a municipality, and it stood the test to that. Just recently in March, the provincial government made the mandatory vaccinations voluntary, I guess. They removed it, and we now have a few decisions to make, and I'm sure that you'll have questions and comments. We collected a lot of information as a municipality. We asked for information report that some townships, some lower tiers have decided to rescind the policy, others have kept it and will remain in place to see what's going to happen. If you were to look at the statistics, I don't have the exact statistics today, but the numbers are going up again with the BA2 variant, and just as a caution to council before you make any decisions, that we are not testing at the rate that we did before. So to get a PCR test, you have to fall under a certain category as an essential worker, a nurse or a teacher, police officer, for example. So those are estimates right now. The estimates, they're using wastewater and testing wastewater, and all indications are that we may be back to a certain stage where it's thousands of cases a day across Ontario. That's not to say that things are all bad in Ontario. By implementing the vaccination policies, and indeed myself and a number of staff have 2 doses of the vaccine and the booster, and there are indications that maybe that will be a regular thing that goes on. A couple of things, that this is our first meeting and, well, our second meeting in 2 years, but really the first time we've met, and I think it's a result of the vaccination that we've got to this point. There are some positive that a number have been impacted either with their families or themselves by contracting COVID, and indeed I'm sure council as well. But we've come through that with our operations, our service delivery, where it's been impacted a little bit here and there, but we've covered for each other. We've cross-trained, and we're confident that we've got to this stage to get through it. But what we need now is direction from council to follow up with so that as the CAO, with input from you and staff, to come back on the April 18th council meeting with a recommendation on what to do with the vaccination policy. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll turn it back to you for questions.
Thank you very much, Tim. I mean, everybody in this room knows somebody that's had it or maybe had it themselves. And I feel as leaders of our community, we have to sometimes make tough decisions. I, for one, am in favor of leaving it in place for the time being. Just feel like we're not quite there yet, but I certainly am encouraging dialogue tonight so that Tim has direction for us at the next meeting. Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll preface this with, I believe 100% vaccines. I have 3 shots myself. I've had my 3rd one since Christmas. I think the province has lifted the vaccine mandates and should the time come, if the provincial government puts it back in. Personally, I'd like to see it come off for township workers. We have people that are within our organization that have been affected by this. Like I say, there's enough appetite here around the table to put it back in if the time comes, but I'd like to see it come off for now.
Yep. Mr. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to further with information, the information report, in South Glengarry, we have, at this point, 10 part-time firefighters who chose a leave of absence to see where we were going to go as a township with the vaccination policy. Outside of that, all other employees are compliant with the current policy.
Good. Deputy Mayor Jaworski.
No, you won't. I mean, I'll preface this by saying I think the province has sort of abdicated a bit on this, in this. I think for various reasons, I think they're taking the path of least resistance, not necessarily the path of everything that we've done so far, what that's accomplished. We lose sight that if we had done nothing, over 500,000 Canadians would have died. But because we did vaccination, because we did, different health measures, we saved, they estimate about 500,000 lives. So I think that is really something to highlight, that we have done a lot of good. I really appreciate the words of Mayor Warden in terms of comments about taking a leadership position on this. And truthfully, if you'd asked me probably this question 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said, well, maybe it's time to rescind it. And then, just as predicted, the situation's getting worse again. So I just don't see, I don't feel, it's hard for me to think that now is the time that we should be rescinding this policy. And certainly, it pains me a great deal to know that we do have some firefighters who are on leave of absence. But certainly, I would want them all to be back doing what they love to do and serving their communities. But also, there's a question there in terms of sending maybe the perception of sending folks to medical calls themselves who are not vaccinated. Again, in terms of your comment, in terms of.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. I was a big believer in putting this in place, was very strongly for it, and I think it has served us well, and I think it's done the right thing. I'm not saying that now's the time to take it out. I'm kind of, I hate to say I'm sitting on the fence, but I think we're close, but I'm not sure what, the near future is going to bring with the case numbers going up. So I'm okay maybe delaying a little bit. I just want to throw something else into the mix. I think this policy has done what we wanted it to do. It encouraged, we were vaccinated at this level, it encouraged, and not just us alone, but by most employers doing this sort of thing, has encouraged a certain number of people. I do not think that keeping this policy in place will encourage any more people to get vaccinated. I think we've reached our limit. The people who are not vaccinated now are not going to run out and get vaccinated tomorrow because we keep this policy in place. It's not going to add any more numbers, I don't think, anyway. Everything here I'm saying is my personal opinion. I don't know for sure, but I don't think it's going to. So, there's some good people on both sides of this issue. So, you don't want to keep it any longer than is necessary. So I'm looking that we should take it out of, get rid of it sooner than later, but I'm okay with waiting a little bit to see kind of what this this number is due in the near future. We're soon going to know. Either hospitalizations are going to start going up here shortly in the next couple of weeks, or they're not. Maybe this new variant is not as, if it doesn't put the hospitalizations up, but then I think we're home free, I'm hoping. But, so I'm okay with waiting a little bit, but I think we want to be.
Is there any comments? Yeah, Councillor Luck?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mills, I have a hard time making an opinion because I have an maybe I'm just here to make that hard decision with everyone here at this council table. Has there been any feedback from the chief medical officer regarding a recommendation, or is the objective of this to keep it open-ended to municipalities?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, no, there hasn't been direct instruction, but we're provided with information. So that's another thing that one of the local municipalities, in differentiating with their policy, decided they were going to differentiate between endemic and pandemic. So if we were in endemic, they were recommending we do this, or they were going to do this, and if we were in pandemic, then this with the policy. So, we're 6 months after we've implemented this policy. I brought it back to you for consideration, and we're going to come back with a staff report on April 18th. At that time, then we can perhaps decide that this is the new policy, but we can revisit it should we go into another pandemic. So that's not really a straight answer, but to Deputy Mayor Jaworski's point earlier, we're not getting a straight answer from the province right now. It's maybes, or you might want to consider this. It's all on us as a municipality to decide. But all the information is out there that we have a new variant. We may be heading towards another wave, but we're being asked as a municipality to live with it, deliver service the best we can. The last thing I think I would say on that is, as this programs and recreation and otherwise, and that's something to keep in mind too, as a municipality.
Great, good comments. Yeah, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess at this point, I think solar may be the most keen to take it off at this point from what I'm hearing around the table. I'll agree with Councillor Lang that maybe it's, maybe we're going into something different, or it's getting worse again. But it's been coming in waves and going in waves. I just think at this point, the provincial government's taken it off. Many provincial governments of all different stripes and different, we'll say, different parts of their mandate, different stages of their mandate have taken it off. I don't think this is a partisan thing by any means. I think this is people wanting to get back to the way things shouldn't be. I'd like to see it come off. I'd like to see it come off at the next meeting. Personally, I voted in favor of this. I agreed with it at the time. Part of it too being the hypocrisy of us not putting one in and having our staff potentially be checking vaccine passports, not being vaccinated themselves at the front here. So they could potentially watch their kid play hockey if they were working, but they couldn't come in and watch on their off time. That was my biggest push to put this in. I think it's time to come off, and I'd like to see it come to the next meeting personally.
Okay.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, in response, that to keep in mind of a date is April 27th, when all masking mandates are to be lifted, and the reopening Ontario Act, everything to be off the books then. So the timeliness of it, again, is get your feedback tonight, which we've got, come back with a staff report on the 18th of April. We'll have 2 more weeks into this to see where we're at, and then it gives us time, with everything being lifted on April 27th, whether the province is going to do that or not. And they've decided to now, but they could always change their mind, so. Thank you.
As they say, a week in politics can seem like a lifetime, so you have your feedback, and we'll revisit this issue in 2 weeks. And as again, the will of council.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Warden. So when I spoke asking for support for a resolution in support of Ukraine 2 weeks ago, I think I used the words, unimaginable, horrific, to describe what was happening, Russia's aggression in Ukraine. And even at that point, there was reports that actions of the Russian army could be considered war crimes, but I think at that time, folks were assuming this is due to rogue members of the military or perhaps more likely Russian incompetence. However, anyone who's watched the news over the weekend, I think it's pretty clear that at this point, there's mounting evidence of war crimes being committed by the Russian army in the Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine as they retreat out. And, this is being denounced across the world. Human rights organizations are going in to document the atrocities. So I'd asked that that line be added to the resolution, so, acknowledging that there is now growing evidence of war crimes and that we should continue to speak in support of what our federal government and what other world governments can do in terms of supporting Ukraine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, I'm definitely going to speak in favor of this. It's at the point now where you start watching, you want to see if there's any updates in the news, and you turn the news off. We can do, but this we can do. We can show support and pass this and encourage our government to keep doing what they're doing and any additional support they can come up with. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Martin Lang. Whereas the town of Mono passed the resolution on March 8th, 2022, calling on the federal government to provide greater support to Ukraine in their fight against the invasion of their sovereign territory by Russia. And whereas there is growing evidence of war crimes being committed against Ukrainian civilians in Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine, and whereas the Township of South Glengarry strongly condemns Russia's attack on Ukraine. And whereas we know that our efforts as a single municipality are slight, but that collectively the many voices of the world have great power and can exert meaningful pressure to stop this war. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry hereby endorses the resolution passed by the town of Mono and calls upon the Canadian government without delay to provide greater support, exert maximum sanctions and pressure on Russia, and to use all diplomatic means possible to end this war. And furthermore, that this resolution be forwarded to the Prime Minister. The national motion is carried. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Jaworski, for bringing that forward. Moving on to committee report 7CA. Basically for information purposes only. And we're going to fast forward to 7DG, Resolutions, North Stormont Public School. I believe Deputy Mayor Jaworski asked to have that pulled.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Warden. So I'm sure many folks know that I'm a member of the County Education Working Group, and this was an item that the working group strongly supported, and then this was ultimately supported by resolution by County Council. Just to give some additional facts, so North Stormont Public School, when it was decided by the Upper Canada that they should be closed, at that point they had about 70 students in their school. And actually that school reached about 100 students in enrollment in the 2021 school year, and they were on an upwards trajectory. I mean, that's a huge increase in terms of numbers. School was continuing to build in terms of numbers. And also, another important piece of information is that with the recent census data that was released for SD&G, although North Stormont has the smallest population, they actually had the largest growth all across SDG, 7.7% of our children in our communities. This is why I'm asking my colleagues here to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Jaworski. I certainly have no issue supporting this for all the items that you outlined. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Luck.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to thank Deputy Mayor Jaworski for bringing this up. This is something very close and dear to my heart. You know, a few years ago when they announced that they would be shutting down so many schools across Upper Canada District School Board, and we all kind of picketed and rallied. I think that's very much needed, and if I can just be a little small voice at that table for North Stormont Public School, let it be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. So that'll come back at our next meeting, or do you have a resolution? Yeah?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a resolution prepared for this evening in anticipation that Deputy Mayor Jaworski would be, and pass this over to you.
Just turn it sideways. Okay, moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Rebecca Luck. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry hereby support the resolution passed by the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry, and urges the Upper Canada District School Board to pause the impending closure of North Stormont Public School at the end of this school year, and furthermore, that this resolution be forwarded to the Upper Canada District School Board and all SDG municipalities. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Alrighty, so moved by Martin Lang, second by Sam McDonnell. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry accepts the items presented on the agenda as committee reports and for information purposes only. All those in favor? All right, Mr. Ciel, you had wanted to add something?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The clerk may not like this, but I'm going to say something. I want to thank everybody tonight for the opening of, this is really the opening of our new council chambers. It doesn't happen just by accident or without planning and thought that goes in. So it was, 18 months ago where we had a vision of renovating the office. It, in terms of customer service, professionalizing the office, having meeting space for constituents when they come in, confidentiality, just overall, it's been a real success. So I want to thank all the staff that are many here from the counties. With the support we get from the counties is great. As you saw the presentation tonight, one of the things is IT support. It's through corporate services with Clerk Compo and Deputy Clerk LeBrun and Executive Assistant O'Shaughnessy. We've put a lot of pressure on rec and facilities with Ms. Servage and Dylan Rourke, the lead hand and staff, and Fire Chief, who stepped in through renovations, jack of all trades, Dave Robertson, who stepped in as temporary with recreation and facilities, but also, in fact, the stand here you see in front of you with the cameras he built. So thank you to all of the staff, and thank you to the support of council this is the end result. So thank you for allowing me that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mr. CEO. It's gone off without a hitch, and I have to say, Mike, the counties may have to get Dave to build the second box for the county chambers in Cornwall, because I think we have a better setup. So thank you, staff. Thank you all. This looks great. It's comfortable. There's enough space, and I think our residents will be very proud of the changes that have happened at the township office. I personally have gotten feedback from folks who are there and say, wow, what a difference. You can have meetings in the boardroom and stuff. So good, well done. Thank you. Yep. Items under section 239(2) of the Municipal Act, SO 2001. 2, a meeting or part of a meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being discussed is D, labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically staffing matter. K, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations, specifically instruction to be applied to negotiations. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you all for attending the first portion of this meeting, and we will see you on the other side of the closed session. Thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you. Moved by Rebecca Luck, second by Martin Lang, be it resolved that bylaw 27-2022, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by resolution, be read a first, second,